number 5.
You guys like Maction?
Yes. Wait, no, not really, but
Looks good. I may have
Typically,
I'll pass it over to Beth. I see Beth there.
I am
Beth,
Beth.
you're on mute there.
Oh, I'll pass it to Tom Peterson.
Oh, hi. I'm here.
Sure. This is Greg DiLoretto talking to you from sunny Hawaii right now, 3:30 in the afternoon. That's how dedicated I am to this mission here.
Whoa.
Hi, I'm Norm Dowdy.
I thought
Good
I
evening,
saw.
I'm Cheryl Tweedy.
Yeah, I thought I saw Dick there,
Dick Steinberg, BAC member.
and also Tenzin. I thought I saw. Maybe I didn't.
I am Tenzin Gonta, also BAC member.
And I know Karen can't make it, so if you want to, is that everybody? Maybe.
I agree. I think that's everybody. Do we want our board members to introduce themselves as well? I think we have a couple board members on the call. Maybe starting with Andrew. I believe I saw you come on first.
Yeah, hi, Andrew Scott, PPS board member and the liaison to the BAC. And I do have to apologize, I will need to leave about 6:30 tonight. I have a conflict.
I'll go next. Julia from Edwards, PPS board member. And I think I saw Michelle. Pass it to her.
Hi, everybody. Michelle DePass, PPS board member, and I'm also going to leave early tonight because I have another commitment.
Great. Thank you. If we could introduce our external guests. Erin, would you like to introduce yourself? I saw you come on.
Sure. Hi, I'm Erin Storley. I am the pre-construction manager for the Benson modernization project. I work for Anderson Construction. I'm heavily involved in the business equity contracting plan for Benson, and I was also the senior PM on the Grant High School project. And with me tonight is Kanan Chapman. Kanan?
Good evening. Yes, Kanan Chapman, business development arm of Anderson Construction, lifelong member of Portland, in particular Northeast Portland community. Happy to be here tonight.
Good. Welcome, everyone. Before we get into things, Marina, I think it's appropriate to, I guess, congratulate the district and especially Julia for her leadership and Michelle and Andrew and the rest of the board on an incredible result yesterday. It actually brightened up the evening considerably. Now I guess the hard work comes, right? Marina, is it premature to give us a kind of 2-minute summary of how you and your colleagues are going to move forward with this?
No, it's not premature at all. We've actually started to have some of those discussions. We talked a little bit with the School Improvement Bond Committee last week. Time in COVID is so fluid, isn't it? It's hard to remember sometimes when we have these conversations, but we met with the committee last week and we did mention that we are preparing a bond execution plan for the 2020 bond. We anticipate bringing that to the School Improvement Bond Committee for the December 10th meeting. And that bond execution plan, you can think of it as laying out both the general parameters under which we perform the work. So things like bond compensability, financing, our standards of oversight, so BAC, board performance audits, construction audits. It has those general parameters about how we perform bond work, but it will also have very specific information about each of the different scopes of work that have been laid out in the 2020 bond measure and how we see those proceeding forward. You could think of it as, if you're going for a walk in the city, it's going to give you the first couple blocks, and it's going to tell you how you make the decision for the next blocks after that when you get to that point. So we can't anticipate the next 4 years and schedule it right out to the minute. But what we can do is say, here's how we're going to move this forward. We're going to have to identify projects. We're going to have to prioritize them. So there's going to be a period of planning before we can get into implementation for most of our program categories. So we'll have a significant amount of information in there that's specific to the scopes of work that were laid out in the measure. We're working through a lot of details right now with our partners on the bond measure, so not just OSM, but also the technology component, the curriculum component, and of course all of our partners within the district as we look at things like community engagement and all of the impacts that this bond measure will have through PPS. So 2-minute summary.
You have plans to involve the BAC in this process?
I'm sure that we will continue to have discussions with the BAC throughout the coming months. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of putting together the criteria for each of the scopes of work and identifying how we prioritize that work. So right now, this is really just kind of the first piece of it.
You don't see any role for the BAC in the development?
In developing the bond execution plan?
Yeah.
At the moment, we have not identified everybody that's going to be involved in putting that together. We have started putting together the draft. We have a number of folks internally that still need to even look at the draft. So we're very early in those stages.
Okay. It just seems like that's something that should be considered. It seems like if we're developing a plan for $1.2 billion program, it might be helpful to get input from the group that's been working with you on the work today.
I haven't said that we're ruling it out. We're still working through that process. We didn't prepare an execution plan for the last bond measure, so this is something new that we're trying to do. We started on that work with the last measure and ended up not needing it based on how we were moving forward.
Excuse me, I want to just interject that it seems like there would be a role in that the bond, accountability committee is really, not implementing the work, but really as in an advisory role. Is that, am I correct in making that statement? And so, and I don't want to put words in any staff's mouth for certain, but it seems like staff should be coming up with a plan and then sharing it out.
And I think, Marina, this is Andrew, is what I'm hearing you say. You're putting this together. It's in the preliminary stages as you're sort of gathering all the input in terms of the bond implementation plan. I do think it'll be useful for the BAC to get that at some point. And so let's, you probably are already working that into the schedule in terms of when to share it. But I do think that it'll be useful to get this group's feedback once staff have put together that timeline. I think, as Michelle, just said as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
It does, of course. And like I said, it's not that we've absolutely ruled anything out. We're really just taking the initial steps right now. So happy to share that for feedback from the BAC. A lot of what is going into that is going to be a reflection of lessons we've learned from previous bond measures. So it should be a fairly well-informed implementation plan when we do bring it forward.
Okay, we have a slightly different format for the meeting this evening. In reaction to some BAC suggestions, and then Marina, you put together this sequence tonight. So I'm going to kind of hand it over to you and have you take us through it, if that's okay.
Certainly. Thank you, Kevin. And yes, we've had quite a bit of discussion about the BAC in terms of the format of our reporting and also the format of our meeting. And while we are working closely with the BAC and the School Improvement Bond Committee on the format of the reporting, we heard pretty clearly from BAC members that our presentations are lengthy, that it's challenging to spend 3.5 hours sitting, particularly through a Zoom type meeting, to listen to all these presentations. And so what we've tried to do is, while we're working on the reporting overhaul, we've shared all of the same reports with you. So the materials that you received ahead of the meeting include everything that we've included previously. There's no change to those materials. However, for the meeting itself, we're going to do selective updates and then try to allow you more time to ask questions, whether it's about what we've presented or it's about the materials that we shared with you beforehand. So in general, we're going to provide highlights for the program update. We're also changing our project updates. This particular BAC, we're only going to have presentations from our modernizations, but all of our staff are available to answer questions on any of the materials that you received, including all of our health and safety teams as well. What we would like to suggest is that we move through the program and these selected project updates all together, and that you sort of jot down your questions as we're going along and save those questions for the question period after the project updates are done. We found one of the challenges with trying to do questions in the middle is that lag of time. It's always hard to know who's talking and how long it's going to take to figure out if there are any questions. And so we're trying to be sort of cognizant of your time and making this flow smoothly. So I will go ahead and get started with the program update, if that's all right. I do want to do a quick check and see if we do not have David Main on the call, but I have not received any public comment from him at this time. If I receive any before the meeting is over, I'll certainly share that at the end of the meeting. So moving to the program update, Derek, if you want to go ahead and flip to the next one. This is actually the only slide we're going to provide for the program update, but this is really just to give you kind of a big picture. What I would like to do is walk you through a couple highlights overall on the program, a couple highlights on our financials, on equity, and on our schedule. What you can see on the balance scorecard, just a quick note, we have noted a couple things that we're watching. So those things that are in yellow, we wanted to be very specific about those, the yellow and the red. The Benson budget, we've just made a note that while we remain on budget, it's always, it's quite a bit of effort to do so. And so we're continuing to watch that. And the Benson team has a presentation later as part of the project updates, and they can answer questions about budget as needed there. And on the equity, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as well. So I just wanted to kind of note that since this is sitting up. From a program operations perspective, we continue to work remotely. Our staff are on sites as needed. We continue to have COVID safety plans in place, and we continue to see COVID infections on our construction sites as they are throughout the community. We have seen that the infections are not affecting as many people in a cluster. So we believe that a lot of the safety measures that our contractors are putting in place are effective. We're seeing much more, individual infections that are not then infecting people around them. So we're feeling cautiously positive about that at the moment. Within the office itself, we've been very focused on trying to fill our vacancies. As we've mentioned before, we have a number of new positions that we've been trying to fill, as well as some vacancies. We're happy to say that we have 3 PM1 positions and a senior manager of business operations, as well as an e-builder administrator that are all in sort of the final hiring steps. This is good news for us. That means, we're essentially getting ready to either hand things over to HR to do the work that HR does in reaching out to the candidates, or we've already handed it over and HR is having those negotiations. So we're quite excited about getting these positions filled and excited about the candidates that we got for those. We're in the process of interviewing for the director of construction role, and we are getting ready to set up interviews for the contracts analyst position. We do anticipate that our recruiting is going to continue at this really intense pace. We know that we have a position within our invoicing group that somebody will be vacating as they retire. And so we'll need to fill that fairly soon. And then we're going to start looking at recruitments based on the 2020 bond. So we're already looking forward. We've done some staffing models, which we had done a couple months ago to identify what types of staff we might need, in addition to the staff that we currently have, in order to move forward with 2020 bond work. So we'll be starting to move things forward soon too. We do have our performance auditors starting their year 3. The focus areas for that year 3 are going to include basically 4 main areas. 2 of those are sort of new focus areas, and the other 2 are standard, if you will. So they'll be looking at communication, outreach, and transparency. So that's one of the focus areas. We'd like them to really take a look at how we are sharing information, to put it sort of generally, and help us figure out what we can be doing better on that. And then the other big area for us is going to be business equity. And so we're working with them to look at what we have done in the past, to help us look at what our peers are doing in the communities around us, and to really help us try to figure out where we have gaps or where we're maybe dropping the ball. This is very intentional. We've asked them to do this very intentionally because we recognize that we need to make some changes in order to improve. We've been doing things. We've been doing a lot of the standard things. We know that that's not good enough. So we foresee that we're going to be spending a significant amount of time this year talking about business equity and workforce equity both. And we've asked them to really make that one of their focus areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we talk about equity in just a few minutes. They will also be looking at kind of one of the standard areas, the 2017 bond status. This is a piece they always do. And then the other piece they always do is looking at prior audit recommendations. So really looking back and seeing what we have completed from previous recommendations. They have started their field work. They've already started reaching out within, within PPS, within, other communities as well, as they start to, really hone in on the direction of their field work. We have our own kickoff with them coming up next week. Within the Office of School Modernization, that kind of is a good segue to the other piece. We've been spending a significant amount of time looking at how we implement audit recommendations. Really, I like to think of those recommendations as opportunities for improvement. And we are focused on continuous improvement within OSM. So we've been taking the recommendations, really trying to come up with good process improvement that will allow us to do things more efficiently, address things better in the future. We've spent a significant amount of time looking at things that seem simple, like file naming and file structure, but can actually have pretty significant impacts on how we operate. So we're pretty excited with the work that we're doing there. Moving on to financials. There are no significant changes in the 2012 program financials from the last report. We have paid out the $4 million to PBOT that we had talked about for several meetings in a row. We are still, if you looked at the reports and noticed that there was still the extra $1 million in there from the previously anticipated $5 million, we're still moving that out. It is still going to move out, no worries there. But now that we've got the invoice paid, we can actually do that work. Within 2012, as far as my contingency is concerned, I am holding contingency for the remainder that needs to go to Grant Bowl, to the Grant Upper Field Improvements Project that was approved by the board. The money that I was holding for Roosevelt Windows is not necessary because we've been able to complete that work within the budget that they already had. And in fact, we'll be getting a little bit of money back from that. However, we do anticipate that we're going to need to set aside some funding for Roosevelt Phase 4 based on the numbers that we've seen come in for construction on the new addition portion of that. We can't provide those numbers. We're still in negotiation at this time, but it's really just a heads up to say that we do anticipate that we're going to need additional funds for that, and we're holding that aside within the contingency of the program. Franklin, we've talked a little bit about Franklin and the potential for a concrete settling issue. We've received more data back. We've been tracking this for several months now, and the data that we've received back at this point really is showing us that there's no longer a concern of settlement, that there was initial settlement, that it has stopped. And it's stopped for quite a while. So we're feeling fairly confident at that. And at this point, all we're really looking at is, what do we need to do to address, sort of the cosmetic repairs based on that initial settlement. Other than that, there's not a significant difference. We did get a credit back on our first OSIP, and so you'll see that the OSIP number changed slightly on that as well. But no big changes in 2012. There's also no significant changes in 2017. Quite frankly, we're continuing to move forward in the same way that we have in the past. We are still forecasting very conservatively on contingency. We are still holding funding aside for corporate activities tax potential. We do have one claim that has been filed for that. We do have two other contractors that have indicated they may file claims. And we are working through that as well. But currently the amount that I'm holding aside is more than what we anticipate for all three of those contractors. I am still holding funding aside for COVID impacts as well. And so just a quick update on the COVID. To date, we have spent $2.6 million program-wide. This means within all of the 2017 projects on COVID-related impacts. We anticipate another 1.2 million in 2020. That is our forecast for 2020. Beyond that, I am still forecasting another 4 million as a conservative number for 2021. I don't actually think we're going to spend that much, but I am trying to think conservatively based on the unknowns in the situation. So those costs, that the existing, the forecast for 2020, the forecast for 2021, that whole amount I am currently including in my program contingency, but our projects are also including that to the extent that their budget allows. So for each project that has impacts, Kellogg is a good example of one that is getting very close to the end of construction. They are well within their contingency, and they're currently forecasting to be able to cover all of the COVID-related impacts within their contingency for the project. So we're sort of doubly conservative on our COVID forecast, if you want to think of it that way.
Marina, can you give us an example of like what a COVID expenditure would be at Kellogg?
At Kellogg specifically, I might actually ask Steve Efros, who I believe should be on this call. Yes, I see Steve. I'm going to ask Steve if he can share some of the specific COVID costs for Kellogg.
Yes, so this was, I think, the whole approach to addressing COVID impacts on all the projects, working with the program leadership, has focused on, the required social distancing, a whole host of other safety requirements, basically incurred some some inefficiency for the contractor. Obviously associated, equipment costs to keep workers apart, appropriately apart from each other, and other, hygiene measures on the site. So there was effectively an inefficiency percentage that was determined that if a contractor could demonstrate that specific subcontractors or even the general were being impacted in this way, that that we basically would set aside those funds for that additional cost impact to the contractor. Additionally, for Kellogg, I think as we realized where we were going to see schedule impacts, earlier in the year, we began to work with them to map out an approach to do overtime work on Saturdays to allow certain impacted subcontractors to effectively catch up whatever the impact was on them, individually. We used that and we basically paid for that overtime for them to help us, basically recover most of that, the schedule impact. So those are a few examples of how we addressed it on Kellogg.
Great proportion of the project. So that's super helpful.
Yeah, the COVID impacts are really related to how they're completing the work, not the scope of the work itself.
Not like upgrading the air filtration system.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. We really wanted to take a proactive approach on the COVID impacts for a couple reasons. One, frankly, it's just good business, right? These are our partners, and we are essentially all in this together. We'll end up paying one way or another. But the other piece of it is that we anticipated that the COVID impacts would have a disproportional impact on smaller subcontractors. Our smaller subcontractors tend to also be our certified businesses. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was try to ensure that we weren't that we were paying upfront for those supports, as opposed to forcing our general contractors to just kind of deal with it and then argue about it at the end of the project when it hasn't really benefited anybody. We wanted to ensure that we were providing that support in a way that was going to continue to keep all of our small contractors on the job and in business and able to continue working. So
I was going to ask a clarifying question about that. So we're thinking about these COVID protocols because we want to make sure that the small, subcontractors that may be certified firms aren't negatively impacted, but are they the ones that are like billing against, or I mean, who's benefiting, or I guess, or who's taking advantage of who's taking advantage of this? Who's benefiting from it?
All of our contractors, it varies depending on the job and what types of things that we need to support. So for some contractors, it meant that we ordered things early from them because they were needing to ensure that they had enough volume to keep their shops open. So there's
material. I heard equipment rental, but also are we talking about materials?
We're talking about material orders. We're talking about equipment rentals or different types of equipment. We're talking about labor impacts. So the ability to get to not be required to do the same amount of work in the same amount of time. Mm-hmm. Because when you can't have two people working closely together, it takes longer to complete the same amount of work.
Absolutely. And I didn't mean to get down into the weeds necessarily. Yeah. I heard that this was to help contractors, and I was curious who is taking advantage of, of our ability to. I'm not phrasing the question very well. I was just curious if we were finding that subcontractors were being helped, or if it was general contractors, or if we even knew.
We definitely know that subcontractors have been taking advantage of this. Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know for now. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. No, we're very clear about that.
Marina, if I could jump in just for a second on this. I think we've said this before, but at least from my point of view, OSM should be commended on the approach you've taken with this COVID situation and working with the contractors up front rather than forcing them to do extraordinary measures and then essentially forcing them to make a claim, which I'm sure some of your peer owner groups are doing. So I appreciate also the summary cost information. That's very helpful, and I'm sure it's very helpful for the board members who are here too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So moving forward into a little bit of note about schedule. I'm actually, your materials go through equity first and then to schedule. I'm going to go ahead and kind of skip over the equity and do that last. Let's just do a quick note on the schedules. I did want to note the only thing that we showed as a potential concern on schedule was Madison, which at the time of the reporting showed a change in the substantial completion. And I don't want to take Madison's thunder, but they have managed to get back on schedule. And so they can share more information about that as needed in the Madison portion of the project updates. Beyond that, our projects are generally on schedule. We do, on our health and safety side, we think there may be some fencing at, I believe, 3 sites related to the security project that may go into January. But other than that, everything else is still fairly well on schedule. No significant changes from the last time. And I just want to note that we're we're already starting our design work for roofs for next summer. Equity.
Can we go back? I'm sorry, I'd like to go back to the financials just for a second. The project management cost report is where we can see where, particularly the 2017 program, is where its shortfall is tracking. And I want to make sure I understand what we're doing here, because as I read it, I think we're understating the shortfall by a little bit, because we're showing some savings of about $5 million on some health and safety work.
It is definitely one of the things, that's one of the challenges with that report, which is why I think we've discussed we don't frequently show specific changes to the health and safety projects there.
Because
as spend up projects, that money always goes back into the unallocated bucket. So yes, that is a misconception if you're looking at the bottom line to include that 5 million, as it's roughly, in fact, the bulk of it is the 4 million from the water quality project, which is not going to not be spent, so to speak. It will be spent. It will still be spent. And in fact, we're moving it out of that project to move it into others.
Right. That was my understanding. I want to make sure I got it right. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we need to address as we talk about reporting moving forward, that particular issue.
Agree.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about equity. We're going to have a presentation later this evening specific to the Benson proposed procurement plan. They're going to talk a little bit about business equity, but I wanted to just kind of mention a couple of things that we have also been looking at what we can do differently moving forward. We're having a significant number of discussions internally, whether it's with leadership or it's with staff within OSM. We're doing a lot of brainstorming. We're also talking with our partners. We've been starting to put together some ideas of how we might, what actions we might want to take to see if we can make changes for improvement. They're wide ranging. They are everything from looking at the criteria that we use in our RFPs for our CMGC projects, kind of on the simple scale of things, to do we start providing what we're loosely calling the OSM University, which is to say, technical seminars for contractors who wish to bid on our projects, informing them about the kinds of things that are required once they get onto the project, and giving them information prior to when they bid, so that when they do bid, they've accommodated that in their numbers, that it's not a surprise when they get the job and they show up and they find out that they have to do certain types of paperwork, or they need to provide a certain amount of documentation for their changes, those sorts of things. So we're looking at what can we do to provide more information up front. We're looking at, the possibility of bringing a position in-house to act as a resource for our business equity efforts. And we have a lot of ideas about that, and we'll talk about that more, I think, as we move forward. But I'm just going to briefly mention that we're looking at how we might be able to survey our past and current certified businesses that have done work with us, and what kind of information we might be looking to get from that. Of course, we also want to be talking with you as our partners here at the BAC. That's part of the reason we've got the Benson presentation coming up. And as I noted before, we've got SEC, including business equity as a major focus area for this work plan this year. So just to touch a little bit on the equity discussion. And I think what I'd like to do is allow our projects to do their updates. And then if we have questions going back on any of that, we have some time set aside to do that. So the first one up, Derek, if you can go ahead and we'll turn it over to Steve Ifros.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Marina. Thanks, Derek, and welcome everyone. Just try to move through the initial agenda sheet pretty quickly, and then we can go through some of the photo slides just to give you a flavor of the work. So very quickly in terms of accomplishments and next steps, the building, as you'll be able to see soon, the building envelope is complete, which is a major milestone. Interior work is significantly complete. Equipment's being finalized. MEP systems are also significantly complete, with the commissioning activities getting underway. So we're beginning that whole process as we reach the end of the project. Solar PV is one of the next things that will reach completion, and there'll be an associated commissioning of those systems as well. And then one of the big steps in terms of, as the owner, preparing the building for occupancy is getting the technology and FF&E ordered and ready for installation early next year. In terms of site work, that's significantly complete, and you'll see the final work that will get underway will be on the north side of the site, where the play field will be located. So you'll get a better feel as I take you through the photos, but very quickly jumping to the better than, worse than section. I just raised a few items that I think were interesting and might offer, in some cases, some lessons learned. Certainly on the better than side, just our team and all the project manager and construction manager efforts have really paid off on the utility side, which is often utility connection, which is often a challenge on a project. But just close coordination between our team and the utilities have allowed us to stay on schedule, particularly with getting permanent power to the building. Another success was the ability to salvage material from the old Kellogg and reuse it on the new building, and just having a great, not just the general, but a great subcontractor to work with to kind of shape the final installation of that material in a really sensitive way. I'd say that one of the worst than, or challenges, I guess you could say, on the project has been the fact that we're the first middle school to use the new middle school performing arts standards, which again I think will be a pretty amazing space when it's all complete. But the challenge of sort of testing out a new set of standards and equipment and exactly how you want the space to be perform has been a bit of a challenge. But I think also having some good subcontractors and a good design team to kind of work through the issues during construction has been helpful. Very quickly, budget overall is looking good. We're running about forecasting about 4% total change orders, including COVID impacts. And then schedule, we're about, excuse me, about 80% through the project, and working closely with our partners in facilities and operations on the educational side to prepare for the program startup in the spring of 21. So maybe Derek, if you could just move to the next slide, you'll start to see some aerial photos. Just looking at, again, at the time it was actually significantly complete, but all the siding or the building envelope is complete. Maybe go to the next one. So just a little close-up view of the metal siding, the concrete wall in front of the building, and just all the pop-out windows and glazing and all the features of the building. Derek, you can kind of gradually, slowly move through these slides. Just some other views, a little bit of the site. A lot of the site work is significantly complete. And then within the building, you'll see the gym, which is also the performing arts space, the music room to the right of that. And then below that, the commons and the main stair. And then the final slides here, just some of the interior features, including the middle one, which shows an example of that reuse of salvaged material. Those are actually original bleacher materials from the old Kellogg building. So again, a great subcontractor that we partnered with to make that work out really well. And then just a final view out at one of those pop-out windows at the very top of the building, looking towards the gym roof and Mount Tabor beyond. But that roof now is significantly covered with the solar PV panels. So that's a quick wrap up. Hopefully that was complete enough for everyone. But certainly at the end, let me know if there's any questions after we wrap everything up.
Marina, is it okay if I ask a couple of questions of Steve?
Sure, that's fine. We were hoping, but go ahead.
You said you've got 4% on change orders, which is really good on a hard bid project. So congratulations. Does that mean that we still have? I think we went into the project with 10% contingency,
right?
So we still have 6%. Is that?
Well, I think it's 4% is calculating against the total project budget. So I'd have to, not good at doing the math under pressure, but I can tell you the percentage. I actually think I have it up here. I have a separate tab that I show. So we've used so far we've used about $1.8 million of contingency, and that's about 32% of the contingency, and we'll probably be closer to like 40% when we get up to all of the pending change orders. But I might have to run the calculation separately after.
Okay.
If we need different information.
I looked at the schedule, and there's an item on the schedule that shows program startup.
Right.
Now, one, I'm not really sure what that is, but it changed since our last meeting. From March, it was March to July, and now it's March into September. And it's showing two durations in there somehow. These kind of summary schedules are hard to read, but showing critical. So can you explain, one, what is that item, and
right.
what is critical in that?
So the March start date is our anticipated time frame when we'll be able to open the building for the planning principle for the new middle school program, to be able to occupy the building and begin to kind of set up the program, understand how different features of the building work, and also begin to bring on administrators of however that is laid out. So it's post final completion. It's really just the timeline that we have, the luxury that we have for the planning principal and administrators to be able to occupy the building before the summer. I think the end date of September, it's changed depending on how the scheduling consultant has represented it, but I think it's just saying like that whole planning process, theoretically will continue all through the summer. It's not like they'll stop planning at the start of summer, but we're basically giving them 3 extra months or so to begin that before the summer starts. I don't know what the critical piece is designating, but I can look that up. There's nothing in terms of, there's no issues in terms of us reaching that point, but I'd have to revisit exactly how it's represented on the schedule and get back to you on that.
And nothing problematic.
Yeah, nothing problematic on our end. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jessie. I'm the project manager for Madison. Let's see where to start. Couple accomplishments over the last period is we finally got our public works permit. So that's all of our road work, both on PBOT and ODOT streets. We have some finishes started, like paint and tile in a couple sectors. We have some curtain wall that has gone in at the beacon is well, we'll see some photos, but it's really visible from 82nd. And so we have that in, so it's really nice. We have a lot of new brick done, which you can also see from 82nd, which is great. Better and worse than planned. I'd like to say, I think better than planned is, yeah, there's the photo. Thanks, Derek. Everything you see in blue right now is already covered in brick, and that area of the glass kind of in the, I don't know, the corner there is some of our first curtain wall that went in. Yes, exactly. Thank you. And yeah, if you could, I kind of need my notes though for the rest of it. You can go back one slide. Thank you. I'd say better, one of the things I've been really proud of with the contracting team is everybody's commitment to still finish this project on time and get school to open. Though COVID's been really hard. We've had some positive test results. We've had to isolate and quarantine some workers. We've had to shut down for small periods of time, and plus all the wildfire smoke, we lost a week to that. So we have used our weather days, and we have basically hardly any float left in the schedule. But everybody is still really committed to getting this job done. So I really appreciate that teamwork and the commitment from our partners. Some worse things, the public works permit took a very long time. It was really challenging getting PBOT and ODOT to agree who had jurisdiction on some things, and that really slowed us down there. We've suffered through a handful of some design changes that are pretty late, which are primarily some things that maybe were in our standards but were missed, and so we've been able to catch them and incorporate them into the project kind of before it's too late, but they're still a little painful to get through. We have there's a ton of activity on site. We have, I don't know, 300 workers on site daily. We have 8 sectors of the building. They're all in different stages of completion. So some of them are getting not the final coat of paint, but the second, the primer and the first coat of paint are on. We have tile going in, and then we have some new construction areas that are not weather tight yet. So it's all over the place. We are on schedule. We worked some overtime, quite a bit of overtime actually, to try and make up some days. So we're currently showing 1 day ahead of schedule, and we're going to continue to work overtime to try and build in some more float. So if we encounter more COVID issues, that we will be able to absorb them and stay on schedule. And then permanent power is going to be energized on Friday. So that's a really big step for us. We've had one new safety incident since the last time. I'm trying to remember what that was because that was several months ago. I think it was a worker step off of a man lift and just kind of rolled her ankle. So she had to, went on light duty for a week. So that was a pretty minor safety incident, but it was recordable. And that's kind of the main summary of that slide. I can walk you through the photos. So see the aerial there, we kind of talked about that one. If you go to the next, that's showing kind of the Alameda side. You can see the new theater, all of the structures built. Our concrete and steel crews will be demobilizing pretty quickly, actually. Next one. There is the south side of the gym. That's going actually really well. And the space is great. Every time we walk through it, if you guys recall that this was kind of a late decision in schematic design to completely tear down the existing gym and build a new one. And just the longer we spend in that space, the more aware we are that that was a really great decision to make. So I wish everybody could see it. So that's going to be great. And next, please. Oh, I guess that's all the photos I chose to show you. Anything else on Madison? Or are you ready to move on to Lincoln?
I thought we were going to cover the contingency situation. Is that in a different part of the presentation?
we didn't plan to do a presentation on it. We did provide the materials in the materials that you were given prior to the meeting. So it is part of those materials. We didn't.
Okay. At what point would you like questions on that? Now or at the end of the?
It says we're going with questions after Kellogg. Why don't we go with questions after Madison too? I was really just trying to make sure we stayed on track. It's sometimes easier if we do that differently, but I don't want to keep you from asking questions.
Oh, okay. Then this is Dick, and I do have some questions about that. Let's see, if you refer to slide, I think it's slide number 36 that has the tables there that you provided for us. And let me walk through, it's hard to kind of do a back and forth with this format. So let me just kind of walk through a little narrative, and you can perhaps capture a number of points that you can respond to when I finish, if that works. First, really did appreciate those tables in terms of the transparency, and it seems really smart to have done the risk analysis and set aside some funds potentially out of the contingency based on the risks that you know about today. So that's really good. We did not find, by the way, the full risk log that was mentioned in the briefing materials. It doesn't seem to be here anywhere. But setting that aside, one of the things that caught my attention was the amount of money set aside for risk for COVID. And you talked about COVID a little bit, but I think we remembered that Jesse said last meeting that the impact of COVID might be as much as $1 million and couldn't be absorbed by the contingency. So perhaps some more illumination about how you ended up so different than the $1 million impact that was discussed last time.
Sure.
Let me finish, okay?
Yeah,
and then you can kind of tie it all together. I think
No,
that'll
that's
just
a good
work
point.
better. The remaining project contingency that's listed here is 12.75 million. I'd like to have you discuss some what your theory is about available contingency when the percent is calculated and then is reflected in the scorecard. For example, we noticed that of the 12.75 million, 3.3 million of that seems to be committed for pending changes, and 4.7 million of that has been set aside for known existing risks, which leaves only 4.75 million for future unknowns. And one way, and you guys may have a different perspective, but one way to look at how much contingency is available for purposes of reflecting the status of that on the scorecard is to consider only the amount that's available for the future unknowns. And with that perspective, 4.75 million is only about 2.4% of the budget, which would fall in the yellow concern area as opposed to green. We are concerned that the contingency seems to be pretty thin for Madison at this stage. There's still, I think, 8 months of construction left. And perhaps you could just, those I guess are the key points. We do have some concern about whether the contingency that's available for Madison is sufficient at this point and should have, by the way, been reflected as yellow on the scorecard to draw some attention to it. I'll stop now and let you guys respond.
Marina, do you have some things you want to add first, or do you want me to? Because it kind of goes between both of us, I think.
You're on mute, Marina.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to let Jesse go first.
Okay. I was say, so in this chart, so I have been projecting that I do have enough contingency to finish the project, but I don't think I'll be able to cover very much of the COVID costs. And so Marina has in her program budget kind of a set aside somewhere or of all the potential COVID costs we've identified. And so we didn't want to carry it in two places. So I'm not showing like $1 million or more of potential COVID costs in this chart because Marina's accounting for it in the program budget elsewhere. I was having a little bit of a hard time following the other part of your question about the 12.75 versus the 4.7 of the knowns. It gets a little challenging to put some of these charts together because of several different kind of contingency buckets, right? Where we have contingency built within the GMP for construction change orders. So that's kind of in the chart you're referring to. There's the blue line, which is like the contractor's contingency, and they use for scope backs or scope gaps and trade overruns and things like that. The owner contingency, the 5 million left within the GMP, is for us to spend on existing conditions, scope changes, etc. Then outside of the construction contract, I have an additional 4.3 million for either, maybe furniture is more expensive than we think, or we need to add more money to the construction contract. So I could move part of that 4.3 into the construction contract. So all told, we do have 12.75 at the time I put the chart together remaining. I'm not exactly sure, and the scorecard is not like, that's more of a, I think, a program rule that they put that together. That's not something that I have that much interaction with. So maybe Marina can talk about the scorecard piece.
Yeah, just make sure I was off mute there. The scorecard is based on specific points in time. So it really, I think we missed the 50% construction at the last one, and that was based on the last one. But it's still where it should be based on the information that we have about the project. I don't think it's reflecting anything inaccurate, is what I'm trying to say. It's not necessarily what it is right now, this date. It's based on certain phases within the project.
Okay, but again, looking at slide 36, it does say that there is 4.75 million available for unknown future issues. And one perspective is that's all the contingency apparently that there is, which is well then, okay, I guess we need a better explanation of how much contingency is actually available and to see a calculation of what that percentage is.
I think the confusing part is on that slide, I wrote a little box that said there's 12.75 left in contingency. And then I lumped together both pending change orders and risks and of $8 million. So pending change orders is some value far less than 8 million. And then the risks is another big chunk of that 8 million. Some of which will come to fruition and some won't. And so it's not like that 8 million is already committed and already spent. So there's quite a bit of that would be available for future change orders and future issues.
Okay, I get your point there, but if you then just looked at the 3.3 million that's for existing change orders, right? And subtract that pending change orders, and subtract that from the 12.75, that still takes you down to a contingency of 4.7%, which is less than the 5% standard on the scorecard. So like, you know,
And my point that I said previously, Dick, is that that scorecard is based on when we achieve certain phases. That phase was achieved previously. At the time that we achieved it, it was still at 5% as opposed to 4.75%. You know, when those scorecards, they don't address every situation perfectly. And they are not intended to show what's happening today. They are intended to provide consistent mileposts across all of our projects.
Can I jump in here? Following on your comment about the COVID. So based on what you've experienced in the last, well, however many months it's been, 6 to 8 months, is there a sense of predicting what those costs might be going forward as a way to help us feel like the contingency is going to be adequate? Excuse me, but on the other hand, I'm hearing you're planning to fund all those out of this other pot, not out of the project contingency. It would be interesting to know, you know, if that pot's sufficient as well for all the anticipated costs based on what you've experienced to date.
So as I mentioned earlier, we are including all COVID costs, both actual and forecasted, in our contingency pot for the program. Even though we are forecasting those within our contingency pot, to the extent that they can be covered by our projects within their project budgets, they will be. So that is something that each of our senior PMs is keeping in mind as they are looking at their project budgets. They are identifying what portion of their COVID costs they think they can include in their project budget, primarily for my purposes of understanding what the risk is to my program contingency. Even though I am assessing that risk on a regular basis, what I'm currently forecasting is for me to take all of it. I don't think that I need to take all of it, but until we get a little bit further along in construction for Kellogg and Madison, I'll probably continue to include the full risk in my program contingency.
Okay.
Marina, I think part of the issue we may get to resolve it, at least going forward, as we re-engineer some of this financial reporting. I think there is an interest in focusing more on contingencies than even project budgets. And that would include the program contingency, because right now we can't see if that's adequate or not, because it just shows that we're going to spend it and we don't know. So that's something to think about going forward.
Certainly.
Kevin, could I ask a question, please?
Oh, of course. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't talk over you.
No, no worries. I was looking for the little thing you hit if you want to ask a question, and couldn't find one here. Marina, question for you. There's a fair amount of federal CARES dollars out and about being deployed for various COVID-related purposes. Are you pursuing any of those CARES dollars for reimbursement of COVID-related expenses on the program?
We have certainly looked at that. Actually, if Dan is available, he might be able to provide more updated information than I can about the claim that we we provided information to our emergency services folks to include, but I'm not up to date on the status of that. Maybe Dan is.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a status update other than just to quickly echo what Marina said. We've been tracking these costs. The district is applying for the reimbursement and they're doing it. I know they're doing it in different batches. And so I believe what's still current is we haven't submitted any of the construction costs yet. And there's a strategy to that I'm not totally up to speed with. But we certainly hope, and the intent is, you know, whatever available to get reimbursed, we plan on applying for and hopefully we'll receive.
Yeah. So in terms of the documents that you're sharing with us, you don't have anything concrete to report yet, but you are pursuing some of those outside additional resources to support the program. That's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
And I had a question for Jessie, if she's still available. There was a reference to the late design changes, and that was really helpful to have that additional narrative from Jessie about that there were standards that were missed but were caught. I'm just wondering if you can, and this might have been in the packet, but I missed it, but how much money was involved with those late design changes? Is there a dollar amount related to that?
Man, not off the top of my head, not even close. I mean, every time I process a change order, it is categorized into it being like a design issue versus an existing conditions or the city making us do something, but we don't categorize it even further than that to I don't have a dollar to value. I'm sorry. It would be like really nuanced to try to pick that out.
Or maybe another way to get to it is, can you give us some examples of what was involved?
Yes, let me think of one. We talked about actually one today where in our standards, it describes which systems need to be backed up by the emergency generator. And it is mentioned in 2 different sections within our standards. And the one that has to deal with some of our low voltage systems, which is like security, for instance, or intrusion detection, was missed as being put onto the generator. And so we've got to add a few circuits to some spaces to make sure that they're connected to the correct panel, so our security system can be backed up by the generator, which is pretty important. So that was just one example of something just was dealing with today.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jessie, this is Kevin. You show a major risk to be addressed. You've got the building name change. What's the exposure there? Do you have a sense?
It's the exposure. It has so much to do with timing, and so because they've talked about an aggressive schedule of trying to have a name by January, which if we have the name by January and the mascots picked and we can get the graphic design of the logos done, then we can get our design team to design redesign all of our signage that has to do with the name of the building and get the graphics up and have a fully functional building visually, how all the signs look. If it happens in January, we could probably execute on and get all that done in time for building opening. If we don't get the information till April, or, it's so much harder to get that done. And so then you're looking at, do we have somebody come back and completely redo the gym floor? When do we do that? Some signs, there's so many different trades that are affected by different types of signs and different materials. And then there's also the programming of systems. It's really nuanced, but for HVAC controls, for instance, the air handling unit might be labeled MAD AHU4. And so we were talking about with the operations the other day, if it's labeled MAD, AHU4, does that mess them up, you know, forever in the PPS system? And if it does, how do we correct that? And there's so many different types of systems we have. And like, I don't know if we're gonna have to go back and redo all of our controls programming to fix all these names at what stage and all that stuff. So it's, there's a lot of issues that it touches, and they're all, you know, the relative cost and difficulty for accomplishing them is all about the timing of getting the building name. Therefore, I feel like, well, this could be a huge risk. It could be kind of small, and we just don't know yet until we have the information. Does that help?
Yeah, I think you're right on. Timing's everything on that. Has that timeline been communicated to the board? Do you know?
I believe it has. We've worked with the school. I also worked with the, I'm trying to remember her name. I think it was Maria. She works in like Jonathan Garcia's office, I believe. And I talked through the timing with her, and I believe, you know, they set kind of a schedule of trying to get the new name to the board and approved in January. But I am not aware of what type of communication has occurred up to the board about that.
So this is Greg. You said your contingency would covers everything that you need. Is it covering this?
Maybe, depending on how much the costs are when we get the information. So we've kind of planned on, you know, if it happens in January, that's amazing, and we can make it happen. And so I believe I put in my risk log like $200,000, which would cover a lot of these things. It kind of depends on how extensive it needs to be. And I don't have all the information yet from all of our different operational departments about kind of the naming convention of systems. And so, you know, if we have to hire all these different contractors back to reprogram and relabel a bunch of stuff to make this building, you know, functional for PPS in the long term, that would definitely increase that kind of initial cost projection of $200,000. I didn't really answer your question very well. The answer is we hope there's enough contingency, but there might not be.
And I was just thinking, when you talk about having to redo the gym floor, that seems significant, or all the mascots and all the signage, the wayfinding, all that seems, you know, projects I've done, that can be significantly big, about a lot of money.
Yeah, I think that was like, you know, initially we thought it was just, you're like, okay, cool, it's just some signs, we can handle that. But then you start to realize how many other things it really touches, and you kind of start to pull that string and it unravels a bit. So we're still learning all the things, to be honest.
Sounds like we can move on to Lincoln, I think. Thanks, Jesse. That was great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Project Manager for Lincoln. I wrote some kind of notes I'll read. You can see on the screen there the sort of highlight bullet points. But as far as accomplishments with construction, our structural steel erection is going well. Our focus has been on the repetitive floors of the classroom sector of the building, going up to level 6, which we just reached in the last week. We've started our concrete slab on metal deck work with the first slab this week, and we'll be pouring concrete slabs on the metal decks at least once a month or once a week for the next month or so. And our final top out of structural steel is scheduled to be at the end of January 2021. We erected our concrete tilt-up panels for the theater shell. We'll see those in a picture in a minute. It was really great to see that structure come up. Our CMU walls are coming up for the gym structure, and we've started our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing rough-in. We've got all of our final documents into the city for our main building permit. we are operating on an initial permit for structural only. And so we, looks like we're probably just about 2 weeks away, just waiting for final documents to be processed, but everything is kind of in the hopper, waiting for the city to finalize things. And then moving along, as far as student engagement, we've got a couple really fun things happening. There's a construction management class that Hoffman Pacific Mark is collaborating with Lincoln admin and a teacher at Lincoln, and that's a year-long class that they've started teaching at Lincoln, and has it's really heavily attended, lots of interest, students getting really interested in the project. Hoffman also offered 2 internships to Lincoln students in general. Had a number of applicants were really from the construction management class. They've hired 2 interns. One just started recently with Hoffman, and then we'll have another one start in the winter. They're kind of staggering those internship positions. And then we have a number of other items related to art, artifacts, school identity, interior signage, some of the things that Jesse was talking about, as well as a mural project, and really kind of blending those all into a conversation with student leadership in kind of really a multicultural approach to get student input on some of these items, making sure that their voices are heard, and there's a lot of momentum within the student leaders to have some input. And so that's one of the things that we've started with our student engagement with them. Moving on to kind of our better than or worse than, you know, we're really better than as far as our high risk activities, which I just mentioned, our structural steel, concrete tilt panels, as well as all the deep footings, pilings, and foundations that we put in. Those were really what we were looking at as high risk activities, especially with the soils conditions. And those have gone really smoothly without any big surprises. Some of the worse than planned items, of course, you know, our building permit is a bit late. So we've been really having a lot of, you know, courtesy inspections by the city. They've been really working with us and partnering with us, realizing that a lot of these permit delays have been COVID related, as far as just city staff having to disperse and work from home. Review times are taking longer. Just to get a document signed and recorded takes about a month when it used to take just a few days. So the city is realizing that, and they're working with us on allowing our work to continue prior to getting our full building permit. Some of the mitigation measures that we've been implementing, really for just what we're seeing as scheduled delays related mostly to COVID impacts. We had to move steel fabrication from one shop to another because the shop in Utah had a COVID impact there, so we moved it to California. That was able to keep us on schedule. We're prefabricating exterior panels, which is the exterior framing of the building. So we're prefabricating those so we can fly them up on the building, and that's also saving about 4 weeks. We're renting these robotic arms that help the masons move the large concrete masonry units by themselves instead of having 2 people lifting them up. These are 12-inch blocks. And so that's a way to provide social distancing for those workers. And, you know, as well as a lot of the site safety measures, just for extra cleaning and so forth, UVC lights, and we've also installed ionic air scrubbers into the site offices, you know, to keep our management staff protected. Another sort of maybe worse than planned was some related to offsite improvements. It's not on these bullet points, but we have a PGE high power transmission line under the site. I think I mentioned this in our previous meeting, but that's something that we're working with PGE to hopefully negotiate some cost sharing, because we're looking at about just over $1 million impact that we were not budgeted for regarding this. And we're hoping to get some potentially good news from PGE at the end of the month when their capital review group will review the priority of their projects, and possibly we'll have funding that could help us there. We had one recordable safety incident, so it's not on this sheet because it just happened right after I submitted this information to Marina. It was a really minor injury. An apprentice tripped over a pipe, injured his knee and his shin, was just put on light duty for a week and then returned to full duty after that. So that was our one incident that we've had. In our aerial photograph here, you can see really our three main types of construction that are happening. We have our structural steel and metal deck, which in fact, since I've submitted this picture, we've gone up all the way to the 6th level. We have our concrete tilt panel, which is the theater shell right there in the middle that has gone up. And then just to the left on the south side is all of our CMU walls that are going up. We can go to the next one. And that's from our site camera from across the street, just looking at the steel framing coming up. Right now, that's, imagine another 3 levels on top, just completed in the last 2.5 weeks. So pretty excited about that. If I go to another one, we're just showing some of the detail of our structural steel system. This is not as common of a system, but what those big plates on the side of that beam that's just resting, those are called side plate connections. So those are moment connections that allows the steel frame to be connected together in an rectilinear frame without having a moment cross bracing that goes between. So you might have been in big office buildings or other buildings where you see that big cross beams coming through for moment protection. Instead of doing that, it's all bolted, and these big plates take care of all of our forces that allow us to have an open steel frame. So it's really, the idea was to provide future flexibility. So if we need to move a wall or change something, we're not going to run into some big steel cross members. It also reduces field welding because all of these connections are bolted. Then the other picture just shows our concrete tilt panels that have gone up for the theater shell. Those went up in about 4 days after we had poured those on our slab on grade, and they've all fit together really well without incident. And so really happy with that. And so I think that's kind of about it. I don't think I have another slide. So if there are any, we can move on, or if there's a question.
Marina, you mentioned equity was going to be dived into later, but I think that was primarily with Anderson and Benson. But I guess the question for Eric would be, how are things looking on equity contracting?
Sure. Yeah, we've kind of improved things from where we were a few months ago. We're looking at kind of right now with what we bought out on the project. We still have phase 2 that we're going to be putting to bid in January, and that's about $25 million worth of scope. So that's kind of remaining to be seen. But we're just hovering right around 17% right now, and that's applied to the cost of work that we have. And so one thing that actually we discussed this morning in our senior project managers meeting was as a way to look at, as we do change orders and use our contingency, that parts of our contingency are also going to those certified firms as well. And so when we have our initial contract value, we have a big chunk in contingency that we don't know where it's going to apply. So I think that kind of skews the numbers a little bit. So as we move forward, we're going to be tracking those changes so we can better see, how that those equity firms' participation increases as change orders go. The overall projection, we're hoping to get around 17.8% or so. That's kind of a guesstimate that Hoffman's put together when we include the phase 2 bidding. And we're getting a lot of that. We have a certified firm that's our earthwork contractor. And so that was a big scope of work, and we're hoping that they have a competitive bid for phase 2, which would really help us out in that regard.
Great, thank you, Eric.
You bet.
I've got a
Can we-
question along those same lines, if I could ask it a follow-up. The gentleman who was just speaking mentioned equity firms. Is that including, is that an acronym for MWESB? Does that include ESBs when you say equity?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to as far as the certified firms. As part of all of our firms that we
ask the rest of that question later. I just wanted to understand exactly what you meant by that. Thank you.
Can we go ahead and move on to Benson? Thank you.
Excellent. Appreciate it. My name is Brian O'Lear. Yep, thanks. My name is Brian O'Lear, Senior PM for the Benson program. I'm just going to do a quick intro and give some overall updates to the program. And then, as always, we have Jen Sohm and Jamie Hurd that will follow up with some more project-specific updates for a couple of the other programs as well. Overall, just wanted to note that the partnership with Anderson and with Bassetti has continued to operate at a really high level. The project team is really working well together. We're tackling some really tough issues on the project through the design. As you can imagine, it's a fairly complicated project. And it seems like some things are getting thrown our way new each week. But I feel like the partnership with both those firms is really operating at a really high level. Looking forward tonight to hearing or to showing you the work that Aaron and Kanan and the Anderson team have been doing towards diversity and trying to accomplish the aspirational goal for MWSB as well. So look forward to for them to showing you that the work they've been doing. A couple things to note. Overall schedule is in good health. We have made some adjustments this last month in terms of submission dates when we anticipate to get in for permit. Primarily, that's to make accommodation for VE activity that we are going through currently with review of the 100% DD set and the estimates thereof. So we have just freshly received estimates from both Anderson and from our third-party estimator. The third-party estimator estimate just came in today. So we're literally just getting those fresh off the press. So we're going to be, we know we have some work to do in the gap between those estimates and our target. But we've got a pretty good process in place that we've started already as we've begun the path to get back to our path to budget. With that, the gap that we're looking at currently from what Anderson has presented initially here so far is somewhere in the range of about 12 to 15 million is what we're anticipating in terms of a cost of work gap that we need to make up, or about 5 to 7. I think that comes out to be around 5 to 7% of the construction target that we need to find in this 100% DD set. We've already begun work in our functional teams to develop the new and updated VE log for this phase. Already identified a number of items, and certainly we're beginning to dive into those details and compare numbers and estimates. And we think that there's a really good opportunity to get some of that reeled back and closer to budget as we get ready to submit for the design phase approval for that here coming up at the end of the month. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen to go over more details for the Benson project itself.
Hello, can you hear me? Great.
We can hear you.
So thanks. We've had a few milestones since we last updated you. The design team has finished the 100% design development package. And like Brian said, that is the estimate has come in. The next milestone for that is the 50% construction documents. Those will be used for permit submission as well as for GMP. Benson Polytechnic is a Portland Historic Landmark, and it's the only PPS high school that has that historic designation. And so we have recently, just this past summer, completed and got approval from the Historic Landmarks Commission, the Type 3 land use review. And we have a couple of other jurisdictional reviews that are underway. We're about to submit for a Type 2 for a few design elements that were discussed during the Type 3. We also have recently had SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, review the project, and we have completed their review and are going to be working towards a memorandum of agreement. Some of the better than that we wanted to report out on is the summer work. We've restored a historic brick building from the actual main 1917 building. We'll show you a picture of that. The summer site building investigation, which is actually still ongoing, particularly since the students are not in the building, has provided some really good information to the design and contracting team members on the existing conditions of this historic structure. Some of the other better thans, design review meetings via online Google Meets and Zoom have gone pretty well. We've actually had some really good attendance, input, and participation. Perhaps that's saving people on the commute time. Some of the worst impacts that we wanted to report out on: the design complexity of a historic renovation, a very large school. Benson Polytechnic is the largest PPS high school at almost 400,000 square feet. That is presented some complex design issues. And then also just the multiple swing site and COVID impacts on cleaning out the building. Next slide, please. And here's that wall, the 1917 east facade of the main school building, before and after. This went really well. And we're going to show you a few perspectives, design development strategies. This is the front facade. On the left, you see the auditorium, and on the right is the gym building flanking the main entry. The main entry is ADA accessible in the modernization and well lit. Next slide. This is a view of the CTE courtyard. So this would be a secure, enclosed student work courtyard with the two-story shop and core academic classroom wings. And then you see a solar array facing south here. Next slide. This is a view of what we're calling the south courtyard and entry, and that's the radio tower that exists and will remain for the KPBS station, radio station. You can see the south historic wall there, which was part of the Historic Landmarks Commission Type 3 process that is restoring and rehabilitating that wall just in front of the new two-story classroom wing. Next slide. And this is a view of the Commons cafeteria. This is in a new building, new two-story wing. And then to the right, you can see some glazing that opens out into an interior secured student social courtyard. And next slide, and this is the main entry. This is the historic wood paneling that's restored, and it will be kept in the modernized building. You can also see some glazing on the left side, which is a secure security vestibule. Thank you.
I have one question, if I might. I thought I read somewhere where PBOT denied your access on 16th Street, and I was wondering what financial or design and perhaps financial impact that's going to have on the project.
Yeah.
So that was actually for the multiple pathways. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So Jamie, you want to go ahead and go into MPG?
Yeah, we'll show you a little bit about that. So my name's Jamie Hurd, and I'm one of the project managers on Multiple Pathways building, which is going to be located on the current parking lot of Benson, and actually will be above a parking lot that'll still serve Benson. So we are about 50% of the way through schematic design at this point. We've been able to accomplish some really good work with student engagement. Bassetti has been very active, Bassetti Architects, in bringing a program called Your Street, Your Voice to the students. And we believe that that's going to start on November 30th and run halfway through January. And it gives students a chance to be involved in design and urban planning and really empowers them to think about how they might impact their environment. And we're hoping to use this program or to engage the students in this program to help inform the design of the school, which is one of the reasons what we wanted to do it in schematic design. Some other things, we had a really good sustainability charrette in August. So this project has very aggressive energy goals. So we are going to be working to achieve LEED Gold and also an EUI of 30. So it's there's a lot of components to that. We also completed a mass timber workshop in August. It's one of the structural systems that we're looking at using. Our community engagement proceeds. We had completed our DAG number 8 in October. And then our budget, we've been working on the budget to kind of align these early schemes with the master plan and the estimates. You can see, I don't have to, I'm sure you don't want me to read everything for you, but we do have some site constraints that were identified due to recent PBOT feedback. It was some early feedback we received from PBOT. They have a current bike lane on Northeast 16th, and they want to augment that bike lane and make it a connector from the neighborhoods into downtown. So they've asked us to not provide any vehicular access off of 16th. The master plan had loading and access into a surface parking lot from 16th. So we really had to redesign the site. They also asked us to locate the entry into the parking garage, which is underneath the school, at least 25 feet from the corner of 16th and Gleason. So we've had to bring that up into the mid-block. So those were the two big items. We do have a little section, and we'll look, there's a diagram later. There's a little section of Flanders that gives us some vehicular access into the south end of the site. Yeah, there we go. We can talk about that. So you can see this is looking at the site. It is the location of the current Benson parking lot just to the east of the Buckman Field. So those yellow lines show where the PBOT wants us to keep clear, and that we had vehicular access coming into the site at that place during the master plan, which was approved. So we've been doing a lot of work. It's also where public utilities come in. And you can see up at the top of the screen, that's where we have to locate the entry into the parking garage below. So that impacts the entry into the pedestrian entry into the building. And then in the south end, you see that little cutout, and that's actually Flanders that comes in and then is vacated kind of partially through the site. So we will be using that back, the southern end for some service entry into service parking, but nothing off of Northeast 16th. We can go to the next slide. So this just captures some of our sustainability goals with LEED. You know, the program for this building will have an enrollment of about 500 students, and it's a mix of the Alliance at Benson, Alliance at Meek students, plus the Dart Clinton students, and Reconnection Services. So it's a lot of students that haven't been participating with school in the more traditional ways. So we are looking at a lot of things that like connecting to nature, trauma-informed design, you know, creating welcoming spaces where people feel safe and want to come into the building. So that is also kind of tied into some of the sustainability goals. But we also have some resiliency goals. I think at this time, because of the bond, the entire building is supposed to be planned for immediate occupancy. Yeah, and that's next slide. Is there another slide? I don't think so. That's it for the multiple pathways building.
And then just to wrap up with the swing site updates, work is continuing on multiple fronts now. On the TI work, we were able to accomplish a lot of work over the summer, and then we just did a phase of work here in October, capturing some opportunities there with the buildings being relatively empty with the COVID. So we captured some more of the scope of work to make it ready for Benson. We're going to continue to do that between now and next summer. One thing I wanted to note that's not captured on this slide that I think is important to recognize is that the team is really continuing to do some work around right-sizing scope. And Jamie and team have done really a lot of work in this last couple of weeks with Curtis and Curtis's new member of his team at Benson with Dan Malone. And they've really done a good job identifying scope that we do not have to do in order to make accommodations for that swing site. So there was a number of spaces that we were originally planning on that the design team had identified to either take out walls or do some significant reconfiguration as TI work. And we've been able to de-scope that in the last couple of weeks. So just to note that the team is continuing to look for those opportunities as well as we go into next summer. So, and then I know that the CTE building, in terms of a better than and worse than, you know, the TI work has went really well. The V cost cutting, you know, and process for the CTE shop building was fairly successful and getting really close to budget on that. However, on some challenges that we're facing right now are on the CTE shop, certainly is the timing and the building permitting timeline. We've had some delays trying to get permit documents and the package ready for that. Good news is that that has officially been submitted now to the City of Portland, but we're trying our hardest to work with them to try to expedite things to minimize our impact to the timeline on that. It's really condensing the time that we're going to have for construction here this next spring and summer to make it ready. So those are the highlights on the swing sites. And yeah, sorry here, that was mostly the talking points that I had planned. You know, and obviously we've provided some of the construction swing site schedule there that we've planned. The other risk here is that Kenton still continues to be of high target risk for us just due to the nature of the De La Salle arrangement for the lease. And we're still continuing to try to partner with them. It's been difficult to do. We're trying to make accommodations to get in there and do work between now and next summer when their lease runs out. But that's been a fairly difficult arrangement, but we're still continuing to work on that. We're going to have a very condensed timeline on that one, even more than Marshall, to make that ready for next year for the MPG program. I think you can flip to the next slide, Derek. I think I've hit most of the highlights that I wanted to for the project.
Brian, Norm with back. It seems like on the main building and the MPG buildings, there's a budget disconnect between the master plan and 100% DD. Is that correct? And are you prepared at this time to address that briefly?
Can you ask that question again in terms of which project?
The main building at Benson and the MPG building.
Right.
Just from what was on the slides there, it alluded to that there's some budget issues between aligning the master plan budget with the 100% DD budget on both those. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we're still in the, so what has happened is we've received an initial, to start with on Benson, and I kind of was trying to give some information and probably in brevity just due to the timing of this meeting, but we are, both projects, just to recap what we're doing, both projects have fairly intense work groups happening and a fairly intense process to try to make some design updates or changes that can then be to basically get us back to path to budget. So on the main Benson job, and they're in two different stages of the project, obviously, with Benson being in the 100% DD, we are like I mentioned, we're somewhere around 12 to 15 million out of our target range for the GMP in the cost of work that we need to identify as cost savings or cost reductions in that project, about 5 to 7%. So the team has formed. We've typically had to go through this on most projects. I would say the difference that I'm seeing here is that we formed very focused work groups, and the number of meetings and resources that we have, there's a pretty high level of intensity that's been happening on a weekly basis between we've set up functional teams, meaning mechanical, electrical, plumbing, drywall, structural, all have very regular interactions between the design team and Andersen and their estimating team, developing ideas that go onto the VE or cost reduction log, and have been going through that process now to identify it. Identify those opportunities. CFI, the third-party estimator that's working under contract for the Bassetti team, just submitted their third-party estimate today, and so I really haven't had a chance to even open it up and go through that. So this information we're sharing tonight is extremely early, and it's going to take us the next couple, 2-3 weeks of fairly intense work to map out that path to budget. For what it's worth, I think, I've been with this project for a while now and seen the team interact and what we did through the SD phase. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I don't know that we're going to get back to our very original budget number, but will we be close enough within reach to manage that within the contingency that we have? I have some confidence that we're going to get there. We have opportunities that we're still looking at. On the MPG side, we had an initial budget come in from Andersen that was a pretty wide gap from what our initial estimate was established in master planning based on third-party estimator. And again, a little bit different tact has been taken there. One is because of the early phase of the project, we don't necessarily have all of those resources that we do for the Benson project in line. We don't have trade partners selected at this point and things of that nature. But what they've been able to do is the Andersen team, along with Bassetti, have set up a very detailed process for target value design or target-based design, target value design. And it's, I would say we talk about that sometimes in broad terms, but they've really taken it to a next level where they've really they're really diving down into the different scopes of work to set budgets for things like, even systems like window systems, doors, hardware packages, and set up those target value designs that will get us back to that path to budget. So then the design team has a better idea of what to, has a better path on what to design their documents around or what products they're going to look to specify. There's a much clearer direction and a much earlier integration of those two components between the design and the budget that will come together. And in the past month, they've made we don't have an official update yet to that last Andersen published estimate. We do anticipate that's coming in the first week of December, but out of the gap that we first saw, I know that early indicators are that they're making really good progress on that. They're percentages, intensive percentages are coming off that difference right now. So, and a lot of it has to do with that it is really early in the design phase. It was a very, very conceptual diagram that Andersen was basing their estimates off of. And so part of that alignment of the estimate is just getting them on board on the same page with the information that Bassetti would have had to have worked with their third-party estimate to establish that master planning budget too. So I hope that somewhat answers your question or gives you some insight.
Yes, thank you, Brian.
Okay. Excellent. Any other questions for us or where we're at with Benson? If not, Marina, I know that I just chatted with Derek offline. I think what we were going to do is he's going to stop presenting, and then we were going to turn, Erin's going to present her screen for the business equity presentation.
I think if it's all right with Kevin, if we go ahead and move forward with the business equity presentation from Benson, it seems
Yeah.
like this is a good time to do that.
Please do. Yeah. Our timing is, we're running late, obviously. So just make a note of that.
Take it away, Erin and Kanan.
Thank you for the intro. I appreciate that. We're here today to just show you what we're working on at Benson. We're obviously pre-GMP, so you're getting a little bit different view of the minority contracting plan and our strategy. And I'm going to try to get my computer up here, make sure I get the right screen. Okay, your entire screen. I wonder if I get to pick it. Yep, there we go. Share. And here we go. Does everybody see a PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. So first I'd like to just introduce to you who's on our team. And I'll just start with myself since I'm already talking, and what each person on our team does. I'm the pre-construction manager, so I really spend most of my time right-sizing the bid packages for interested firms and developing the timing of those bid packages and when is the right time to get them out to the market. And that's coordinating with the design team, and then also sometimes even with holidays and other projects that might be bidding at the same time. Kanan and Elizabeth are on the call with us. Kimberly, I think, is watching the live stream, so I'll let Kanan and Elizabeth introduce themselves.
I guess so. Go ahead,
Kanan. No, go ahead, Kanan.
No, you go. I'm after you. I think time is of the essence. Go ahead, ladies first.
Okay, thank you. So good evening. My name is Elizabeth Jahala, and I am the Diversity Outreach Coordinator. So I guess can I say what I do right now, or do I have to just introduce and come back later?
No, go ahead now.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so as a Diversity Outreach Coordinator, my role is to maximize participation of co-bid firms in our projects. In our strategy to achieve this is by building strong and lasting relationships with our subcontractors. And to help build these relationships, I attend monthly meetings held by local minority professional groups such as NAMAC, OAMI, and PBDG. At these meetings, we present upcoming project opportunities to their members. We bring flyers with information about our projects, and we network with potential subcontractors. We add these subcontractors to our bidder list, and I personally follow up with a phone call and make sure they receive information about our pre-qualification and bidding process. And I also ask them if they need additional training and mentorship through, if they need additional training or any other, help, we provide them with training and mentorship through workshops if there is a need of that. And because we understand that some co-bid firms don't like to bid large institutional projects because they find their contracts are just too complex and it's a long process. So we always work together with them to overcome these obstacles through workshops. And we have done workshops through the NAMAC University, which is a program run by the NAMAC group. And also we have done estimating mentorship trainings with co-bid subcontractors on the Benson project. And also we have created manageable bid packages. And this is pretty much what we have been working together with the entire Benson team. And I think that's all I have.
I'll follow up. My name is Kanan. Yeah, my name is Kanan Chapman. I serve as business relationships manager at Anderson. I am part of the Benson team as community outreach and assist Erin Kimberly and Elizabeth in the diversity as well within the project. I would say the community outreach component of this job is more so a skill that I possess, more so than a position I hold, being a lifelong member of Portland, going to every school that you could possibly imagine, starting at Vernon, Whitaker, Benson, being a graduate and everything. I feel that I have a good pulse on what's going on with the community, but serving in a business development range, my primary function is to nurture the existing relationships that we have with our owners and clients, as well as our sub partners, as well as trying to forge new ones and kind of thinking outside the box in terms of how Anderson could get in business with a more diverse and inclusive group of subs as we move forward into the future.
Thanks, Kanan. And then, like I said, Kimberly is watching the live stream. Since we did Grant, Anderson did a JV with Colas, as you're aware. But since that time, both Kanan and Kimberly are added team members to the Anderson organization. I think that Grant was a really good step for us to really understand how much work it takes, how much commitment we need, and how to develop long-term relationships with certified subcontractors and trade partners. And so it's really exciting for us to have that commitment from the top down in our organization. And we also see it making a difference in those relationships. So what I wanted to show you next is the question of what's probably going through your mind, which is the aspirational goal of 18% really realistic for Benson? We've seen other projects struggling within the PPS organization. And so our response to that is, yes, we really do think that the strategies that we want to employ will get us there, but we need some support from you all to employ some newer strategies that haven't necessarily been utilized on previous projects. So I wanted to show you some data on that. So what strategies are needed to achieve the 18% aspirational goal? Of course, we have public bidding, and that's open to all bidders, certified and non-certified. So that doesn't guarantee any work to certified firms. Other potential processes that we've seen implemented on other projects that are non-PPS, but also local government regulated, similar type of public entities, allows for MWESB set-aside packages. So we would only bid to certified firms. The third is direct contracting with certified firms. In this case, we would say we would select a certified firm and start developing a relationship and utilize a third party for cost verification. And so it eliminates the fear of competition or the potential of a lot of time invested in the bid process or the estimating process with potentially no outcome. But it still allows for fairness because we get a third party to verify that we're getting market rate and being good stewards of public bond money. So I wanted to show you a look at what the traditional method allows for if we just go through the steps that we've been going through for the past years. Should we expect anything differently? Probably not. So what do we do typically in the traditional method, and what does that get us? So number one, I wanted to also point out that the largest concern that Anderson has is that we are all currently vying for the same subcontracting pool. And there's a ton of work in the Portland metro area that's coming from TriMet, coming from Metro. And we're all the generals are essentially fighting for those same subs. So the question is, how do we get those subs or trade partners on the Benson project or on any other projects for PPS? So if we use the traditional method, we would use a low quote or a best value approach. You can do a point score, or you can just take a low bid. And this is considered really high competition for subcontractors. If we use this method, the pie chart on the left shows you that we have 87 bid packages that are going to go out on Benson. And we think that of that 87 bid packages, we're guaranteeing none of them go to a minority company, because you're strictly using the minority, the low bid or the best point score. They may be successful because they may get the low bid or they may have the best point score, but it doesn't guarantee any of those 87 packages necessarily going to them. And if you look at that in project volume, we have about 167 million of the cost of the work. There's about another 45 million in the contingencies, fee, and other, I would call them the back page markups that you're used to seeing. So we really have to get all of our participation out of this 167 million, because this other 45 million wouldn't calculate at the time of strategy or estimate. We wouldn't necessarily, to somebody's point earlier in the meeting, we don't necessarily calculate that we're going to, what percentage of the contingency is going to go to a minority contractor. So we conservatively estimate that we're just using the cost of the work. And at this time, we're just using the traditional format. We would think that we're trending close to 14% minority participation versus the goal of 18%. We're not quite getting there, but we know that we can get there. So here's our proposed plan. We use all three of the contracting methods. So yes, you do some low quote. Yes, you do some set aside to minority firms only. Yes, you do some direct source or direct contracting. So if you look at this, it's kind of an interesting study, because what this now says is of that same 87 packages, 65 packages are still open bidding, just fair market. Coincidentally, the other two pieces of the pie are split exactly the same, 11 at direct contracting or sole sourcing, and 11 packages at bidding to minority firms only. So the reason why this piece of this image is really important to look at is its number of opportunities versus volume. And many of our trade partners that we're trying to get involved in projects like Benson are simply looking for an opportunity. They don't necessarily want the biggest opportunity because they're a small growing firm. So if you think about that, the dollar ratio may not make a lot of sense. So we really like to look at the number of opportunities, and here there's still 65 opportunities that would have been normally the 87, but we're setting aside 22 packages that are definitely going to go to a minority contractor. And then when you look at that in money, what it does is it says there's 151 million that will be publicly bid, low quote or best value, but we're going to add in another 5 million in the set aside packages and another 11 million in the direct contracting. So even though we were setting aside 11 packages here with MWESB bidding only, it only represents 5 million, which is 2% and 5%. So what you get here is you've gone from your 14% that you had before, you add 2, add 5, you're now up in the 22% range for our forecasted participation level. So we think that that's a really good approach. It doesn't really, if you look at the overall project volume, 16 million doesn't seem like an unreasonable ask to really leverage opportunity for firms in our area that are really interested in this project. Any questions so far? So this is the comparison using the traditional method. Here you're at 14% participation, and here you're up at 22%. We'd be trending trending above the 18% aspirational goal. We think that that's very important at this stage in case people come in, people come out, so that's what we would like to proceed with. And then I think that's basically the end of the slides, and now I don't know how to go back on the slides, but it's a perfect segue to Canaan, because I just thought that you might want to talk a little bit more about the market. what you're seeing in the relationships that you've developed over the past couple of years at Anderson and long-term relationships that you have in the community.
Yeah, some of the things, well, I would say some of the initiatives that we had kind of started were, as Aaron kind of spoke to, are just creating more opportunities. And so for us, it has been very, very important to make sure that we connect with the stakeholders within the community who actually lead these organizations, that these COBID and MWSB subs actually partner with. So whether it's the OAMIs, the PBDGs, NAMACs, actually making sure that we connect with the leadership within those organizations to lead us in the right direction, understanding that there are opportunities out here. And to be honest, the market isn't necessarily ready for the opportunities that have been presented. And as Aaron had kind of spoke to earlier, between all of the different projects that are going on, what can we do as Anderson to make these subs choose to work with us? And so the number one thing that we have to do is be consistent in our commitment to the community, making sure that we understand that some of this can be a little bit overwhelming in terms of the sizing, making sure that we take out our time to walk them through the process, be there for them. So if they do have any reservations or they think they may fall short at any point, that they feel comfortable enough with us to actually convey that so we can kind of work through those. The last thing we want to do is offer some opportunity for some subs and they're just not ready for them. And then we have to start from ground one. So making sure that we're working with the leadership within those entities to really appoint the correct people for the right project. Another thing that's been attractive as well is just the uniqueness of Benson. Selling the situation of Benson being really the only trade vehicle within not only Portland Public Schools, but in particularly the state of Oregon, really gives these subs and the GCs that we work with as well an opportunity to kind of forge the next generation of tradesmen and tradeswomen at Benson. So that allows some people to dive in a little bit more than they might in other projects because it kind of puts you hands-on. And I think that we've used that to our advantage. I think that Aaron, Emily, and a lot of our leadership team at Anderson has gone above and beyond to make sure that they make this self-available for some of our subs to actually walk them through the process. I know, for example, we have a meeting in the morning working with Advanced Tribal to try to get them up to par on the concrete scope of work. But in order to make them feel secure, we had to exercise a relationship with Raymore Construction and in particularly the owner, Jeff Moreland, and bring him kind of down the mountain a little bit to wind up bringing some other people up the hill. And so I would say some of those efforts will serve beneficial for us long-term. And again, we understand there's still a lot of heavy lifting in front of us, but being accessible, being understanding, and really making ourselves available for everyone has really channeled us in the right direction.
I have a question, if I might. I'm curious, this issue, and I remember facing this at the port, trying to, we're all competing for this small pool of contractors. Is there been any growth in the pool? And what are contracting communities and others doing to help grow the pool? Because to me, it's a combination of, yes, making sure there's opportunities and doing and what your structure, creating opportunities in a way where they're more successful. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal in my mind is to grow the pool. So you have more opportunities, you have a greater pool to draw from. What's going on? You know, I'm out of touch a little bit, so I'm curious, what's going on right now trying to grow the pool?
Kanan, you want to tag team this with me?
Yeah, I could jump in there.
So
go ahead. I'll follow up.
Well, I was going to start out with, Anderson has really strengthened our relationships with organizations like PDBG and NAMAC, to not just be a member that goes to a meeting and says, we got projects. What we've actually done is started doing some NAMAC university trainings, and that gives us an opportunity to help grow the pool. People that are wanting to be in business or have just started their business, so it's in the very, very infancy. And so we're starting to see more participation in those, and I think that that's a good sign. But that also makes a very small company and a very large project, it's a hard fit. You can get an opportunity, but you might not be able to get the volume that you want. You're right sizing a package, you're giving them a smaller section of the building. But still, when you're just tracking money, because it's all based on the 18% is based on payments, that makes it hard. It may be 100% of what they want as an opportunity, but it might not meet the requirements of the project. So it's really about getting people interested in being certified, having a business, and being willing to put in the legwork to learn how to be a contractor. And it's been very eye-opening to me, even just in some of the work sessions, because we'll talk to some subcontractors that are well on their way in the journey, and they send us stuff and we're like, where have you been? This is great. Well, they're probably also about to age out of the program, right? Because there's dollar limitations and timelines. Then there's others that you really, really need to help. And they're just in the infancy. And those are actually some of the most rewarding, but they take a lot of effort. And if they're interested, we're all in. Kanan, what were you going to say?
I was just going to echo a lot of that. What I would say is that outside of the mandates and the goals that have been tied to certain projects for the majority of the market, speaking to the COVID market, these opportunities haven't necessarily been tangible. They haven't necessarily been realistic. In a bidding situation, many of these subs don't feel that they actually have a real chance at grasping the work. So trying to make them feel a little bit more confident in the process, but then understanding that we're on the outside of their support circle. We're kind of the big fish that they look at if they get a job from us that can kind of change their business. So working within their inner circle to make sure that we can kind of grow them, coach them up. And as Aaron alluded to as well, there has been a lot of grassroots initiatives, as well as the NAMAC University, which is an ongoing training series, which just kind of educates everyone in business, not only the trades that in the scopes that they carry out, but just the business that carries over for no matter whatever scope that they have. And so just making them a little bit more versed in their business, making them a little bit more aware of opportunities that are out there, and then really just kind of mentoring them through the process, even when it doesn't go their way. We've mentored several groups on a couple of scopes of work that didn't get the job at the end of the day. But the fact that we went through the process with them, the fact that we were there, the fact that, you know, they did get opportunity to present some of the leadership within their company, whether there was a language barrier or not, made them feel a little bit more confident in some of the strides that we were trying to make. And to be honest, it's just the beginning of the heavy lifting. I mean, these are things that probably should have been done quite some time ago, but in today's climate, now is better than any. So we're working towards it, and I see us moving in the right direction.
And
I have a question. Is mentoring really the limiting factor, or is it investment? Is it under investment that's really the problem? Because we're talking about an institution here, and everything has to be within this framework that has been going on for some decades. And I'm not sure if do the minority-owned firms that certification time out? Do they get too big, or is that just ESBs that can get too big and get decertified? Because maybe some creative solutions are needed here with all this bond money. I mean, if there were more investment available, would there be more firms in this same pool that you're talking about?
Well, I think it all goes to the contract that we have right now with PPS, the language. It says that you have to be co-bid, which is unfortunately sounds like COVID, but it's not. It's co-bid with a B as in boy, co-bid certified in Oregon or Washington. And so we actually just call the firms certified firms because of the Corona. Doesn't really translate very well. But there are firms, for example, Apollo Mechanical, who's doing a lot of your mechanical work, both on Madison, Grant. I think they were on Franklin. They're slated to do work on Benson. They're really certified, but they are not certified in the state of Oregon or Washington, so they don't count. There's also folks that are like Viking Sprinkler is a women-owned business. But the volume of their company is too large, so they can no longer be certified. So it's a volume, and then there's also a timing. And I couldn't tell you the exact. The emerging small business has a more finite timing, but you know, like really valuable players like Raymore and others, they're doing great work. But there will come a time where I think it's like a 3-year look back or something like that, where they may not have their certification. Are they still a minority owned business in Oregon? Yes, they are. And what we want them to do is to succeed and to be here for a long time. But it works against the idea of a large project and a larger trade partner being available for us. Does that make sense? So it may just be something that you want to look at as the loosening of the requirements. Should we allow federally certified? Should we not limit to co-bid certified only? I know up in the state of Washington, there's a little bit looser interpretation.
Aaron, this is Kevin. I hate to interrupt the train of thought. Time is going by here and we're running late. I'm sensitive to that. But I think when you introduced the subject, I think you said that you need something from us. Maybe I misunderstood that. But what are you looking for from us?
Well, we're looking for the approval of our contracting plan, which has some of the concepts that I presented today. And I'd let Brian O'Leary take that one. I'm assuming that there's some type of a dialogue here.
Yeah, let me just make a couple comments here. One is what we wanted to bring forward to show you, because Anderson's plan around Benson has some alternative components to it, like the direct appoint, the portions of that plan or that pie chart that Aaron was referring to that are more direct appoint. That's an alternative process to our normal procurement. And the guidelines, it's allowable, but we wanted to present this information to show you what their efforts were in order to achieve the contracted aspirational goal of 18%. We also wanted to show you in context, just real quickly, just wanted to show you in context what that meant. That the level of effort was not just an easy ask or an ask for an easy button. This has come with a lot of thought and very conscious use of those direct dollars to those firms to tie in with that investment of these firms that they've been researching that they think have high value for PPS and potentially in the future. So we wanted to present that information kind of in context so that when, you know, because if you didn't have that, you could easily interpret this as saying, well, they're just asking for an easy button, and we're really not. It's a very intentional strategy to try to meet that 18%, which we think is feasible and a great aspirational goal. We're all behind it. We just need some help to get there.
I just want to clarify too that I'd asked the team to bring this presentation to the BAC because we've had so much discussion about what our projects are able to attain at the GMP. This is prior to the GMP, so we're trying to give the BAC an opportunity to see what is going into the steps leading up to the GMP the types of efforts that are being made, and we're looking for feedback and creative ideas from the BAC if they think there are other things that we could be doing as we lead up to this JMP moment.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I think it's a good discussion before. And I appreciate the work that's been done on the plan. I just wanted, when I heard you needed something, I just want to be clear, and you know this, Marina, of course, that we're not an approval body here.
Correct.
So we can give you feedback and opinions, and I think the members are certainly willing to do that. Speaking for myself, I think this is, I don't know about the numbers, whether it should be 5% and 2% or 4 and 3 or whatever, but certainly a varied approach is necessary because it doesn't work. One thing we know is it doesn't work just to put everything out to bid. And if anything about your plan, I'd be a little skeptical about the 14%, frankly, that, can that be achieved from just open bid? But you've got, with your plan, you've got some leeway here. You're planning for 21, and if you fall a little short, you still meet the goal. And I think that's commendable.
Yeah, I'd like to add.
Thank you.
That I'm really impressed with your commitment to this, and it is a challenging environment. I just retired after 40 years in the business. Kevin was in the business contracting, and sounds like Tom was, and it's been an issue that's been trying to be addressed for 40 years. When I first entered the industry in '79, we had the same questions about how do we meet the contracting goals on public works. So I commend you, and I think in order to meet and exceed the goals, the three-pronged approach is probably necessary. My only concern would be the kind of the direct contracting. Is there any conflict with public contracting law? Or, with that. I think it's great.
Real quickly
we've had this discussion with our procurement and contracting folks as well. They have seen this plan. That within our rules, we do have the ability to do this. But I think that we also need to provide really good rationale behind it. And we need to look at, the context of how much is held aside specifically for certified businesses compared to how much is actually being contracted out through a competitive procurement, or shall we say an unlimited competitive procurement. So, we're definitely having those discussions internally as well.
And you can see that percentage is really, really small compared to the overall project of what we're proposing be that direct source. And I think from a cost perspective, it may have gotten lost in the content, but we are proposing as an alternative, just, if we are going to direct a point, that we assign a third-party estimate and do a thorough review of those costs and make sure that we're doing good due diligence and being good stewards of that money. It's not just it's not just a pot to use, so to speak, freely. That will have definitely its cross checks on it, and probably even more intensely than maybe a low bid process might have. We'll be very specific about that third party review. So we think that that's achievable on all fronts. Yeah.
This is Tenzin. I had a follow-up question to what Marina was presenting. So I was kind of inferring from the way you described this. So PPS, is this the first time PPS would be approaching or using these approaches that Aaron's describing in terms of direct appointments and MWESB set aside on a project?
On a CMGC, this is the first time we've had somebody suggest they'd like to only allow certified firms to bid on a particular package.
I think we've used
that is correct. We have used best value previously. So it's not, I think it's moving down the continuum a little bit. So that is why we're looking at it pretty closely. But we also recognize that we need to do something different. And we need to spend a little bit of time looking at how we make things work within our rules, as opposed to simply saying, this doesn't meet what we've done before and therefore we can't do it.
Yeah, I really commend you for thinking through a pretty creative approach, and I recognize that there are some difficult choices you're making here, because there will be people in the industry who may not support this type of bidding environment. But to me, it's a pilot. It's trying something very deliberate, very specific, very refined, to see if you can make it work in the environment. And I would suggest you set it up, if you choose to go forward with this approach, and do a pretty thorough evaluation afterwards and compare the results relative to what might have otherwise happened in the marketplace. One of the things I like about what you propose is there's still a competitive process to it. You're still getting bids from different subcontractors. It's just a narrower group of people that can bid on it. So I think going through the practice of bidding in a public competitive environment is really good experience for firms, and that too can be kind of a mentoring, teaching moment for them.
I support the
Well, thank
approach
you.
as well. A question, but I don't want to keep the meeting going any longer. So, well done.
Okay, good. We'll probably sign off.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks.
Marina, I'm seeing that we're way past the scheduled time. I wonder if there's some way to maybe short circuit the rest of the presentation and invite, I don't know, email questions if committee members have that. I'm open to alternatives at this point.
We don't have any additional presentation, so we're certainly happy
Okay,
to.
the rest of it was just informational for us to read through.
No, I have nothing else for you.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
I'd just like to add a comment if I could.
Yeah.
Can I just, because I support what the rest of you have been saying about the creative solution. And but the word institutional racism hasn't been mentioned. And that's why we're all working on these goals in the first place. And it requires something different and creative. Let's hope it doesn't require it for a long time. But I mean, we got to this place for a reason. And I don't think the market should be the driving limiting factor when we really need to change the limiting structures that are in place now if we're going to get past this problem. So I encourage these creative solutions.
Thanks, Beth. That's the sense I'm getting from everyone who spoke on this. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the sense I'm hearing. Okay, with that, let's move to our wrap up. I assume, Marina, our presentation will be the December committee meeting. Is that a good assumption?
That is a good assumption. That's the only one left between now and the end of December.
Okay. Then for the committee members, as usual, I'll try and draft something and get it out. I'll try and do it more promptly than I did last time. So with that, I don't want to close this meeting without noting that Tom and Tenzin, and actually myself, are moving on to bigger and better things, I'm sure. Tom's given great service to the BAC for 8 years since the 2012 bond passed, and Tenzin has been great since for the last 4 years, and especially on performance auditing and other auditing, cost auditing questions. And I just want to thank them both and let you know that as far as I'm concerned, at least, your work and support has been invaluable, and the district and students and staff have all benefited hugely, plus taxpayers, by the way. But yeah, thank you. With that,
thank you, Kevin.
Sure. With that, I think we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.